So thank you to everyone for coming tonight for my presentation on the I Ching. As all of you already know, the I Ching is one of the 5 classics of imperial China, and the meaning of the I Ching is the classic of change. And what is interesting is that I means change, but it also means on change. Okay, so it's the classic on time, becoming, and timelessness, being. So it is a classic on the whole reality. The I Ching is the name for a document of 24,500 Chinese characters. At the core of that document, you have what is called the Zhou Yi. And the Zhou Yi simply means the change or the unchanging of the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou Yi has 4,400 Chinese characters. And the rest, meaning the 20,100 Chinese characters, is coming from the philosophical, ontological, and epistemological elaboration on the Zhou Yi, called the Shi Yi. And Shi Yi in Chinese means the 10 wings. And wings is a metaphor for chapters, okay? Simply that. I would like to take year 124 BCE as the starting point of my presentation. Because in 124 BCE, the Han Empire created the Imperial Academy, and the Imperial Academy in Chinese is Tai Sui, T-A-I at the fourth tone, X-U-E at the second tone, Tai Sui. And the philosopher Dong Zhongshu, born in 179 BCE and died in 104 BCE, gave an inaugural speech at the overture of the Academy in 124 BCE. And I want to read the first lines of his speech because it is truly the core of the I Ching. If you forget everything else that I will tell you tonight, but you remember those 5 lines, you have understood the I Ching. So I start the quote. Man receives his mandate from heaven and is therefore superior to all creatures. Other creatures suffer troubles and defects and cannot practice humanity and righteousness. Man alone can practice humanity and righteousness. Other creatures suffer troubles and defects and cannot match heaven and earth. Man alone can match heaven and earth. So please remember, man received his mandate from heaven and is therefore superior to all creatures. Man alone can match heaven and earth. So why do I say that? Because I will go through 9 general principles about the I Ching and about the classical Confucian education, but also remember the first principles. All things are between heaven and earth. That is the first principle. All things are between heaven and earth. Now, I would like to take a kind of parenthesis about the classical Chinese education. It will take about 3 minutes. Please imagine the core of the Chinese education as the schematic representation of a house. So you have to imagine a square, and above the square, you have a triangle. The square, at the center of the square, imagine an hexagram. And here, I would like to show you an hexagram, which is the hexagram number 11. Okay, so you have 3 broken lines at line 4, 5, 6, and you have 3 plain lines at line 1, 2, 3. So line 1 is the bottom line. And at your right, you have a Chinese character that is pronounced Wang, and Wang means king or sovereign. So I would like you to remember that. At the center of the square, which is the foundation of the house, you have an hexagram, as many, if not all of you already know. You have 64 hexagrams in the I Ching. I chose the hexagram number 11 because that hexagram number 11 with 3 plain lines, 1, 2, 3, and 3 broken lines at 4, 5, 6, is called Tai, meaning supreme peace. So at the center of the square is the hexagram or the representation of the world at a certain moment. On the left inferior corner of the hexagram, you have one of the 4 books in Chinese, Su Shu, meaning the Ta Shui, meaning the great learning, having been written by Zhengzi, a direct disciple of Confucius. Confucius was born in 551 BCE and he died in 479 BCE. His direct disciple, who is called Master Zheng, Z-E-N-G, was born in 505 and he died in 435 BCE. And that guy wrote the Ta Shui, the great learning, and the great learning, as all of you already guessed, is not about mathematics, it's not about Chinese, it's not about grammar or agriculture. It's about the epistemological development, meaning the advancement to the 6 layers of your mind. And you notice that an hexagram has 6 lines. Each of those lines symbolize epistemologically 1 layer of your mind, that I will come back to that later on. On the inferior right side of the square, you have the other classic called the Chongyong. The Chongyong most of the time is translated as doctrine of the means or doctrine of the centrality. I much prefer centrality. And if I have to translate myself the Chongyong, I would propose centrality as a translation, because in the Chongyong, the infinite awareness is explained and you are introduced to how to maintain yourself at the center of the infinite awareness. And why the 2 are at the base of the square, it is because it is the basic foundation. The Chongyong and the Ta Shui are not the advanced philosophical books. You have to see them as manual for beginners, okay? When I was a child, I learned those 2 books as a manual for beginners when I was 5 years old, okay? So they are very small books. Those books are practical books for introducing beginners to the Chinese classical education, to the notion of infinite awareness, to the notion that you have 6 layers in your mind, and to the notion that you have to learn what is called meditation, in other words, to be clear for everyone. On the upper left side of the square, you have the analects. Okay, the analects is an English word coming from the Greek analekton, meaning selected sayings, because it is the books on 20 chapters about the selected sayings of Confucius, the guy who rejuvenated the Rujia, that in the West we call Confucianism. But be informed that the Rujia existed for about 1,000 years before the birth of Confucius in 551 BCE. Rujia means the school of the scholar. And on the right side, upper right side of the square, you have the other philosophical book by the school of the scholar called the Mencius, and it is an eponymous book, meaning it bears the word, the name of its author, the philosopher called Mencius, and he was born in 372, and he died BCE, of course, and he died in 289 BCE. Okay, so that is the foundation of the house. The hexagram symbolizing the epistemological development through the 6 layers of your mind, the 2 manual, Ta Shui, great learning, Chongyong, centrality, the selected sayings of Confucius, and the Mencius on politics and epistemology, of course. In the triangle, which is a kind of roof for the house if you want, okay? At the center of the triangle, you have the I Ching, okay? And on the left side of the triangle, inferior left side of the triangle, you have the Shu Jing, the book of songs, having 305 poems. I will not enter into the details of the poem because it's not the subject of today. And on the left, on the right inferior side, you have the Yi Jing, the book of documents, concerning documents of the Zhou dynasty as owned at the 11th century BCE and as near us as the 6th century BCE. Okay, and the Zhou dynasty once again started their rule in 1046 BCE, and they truly ruled China from 1046 BCE to 770 BCE, from 770 BCE to their demise in 256 BCE. They were not truly king, but they retained enough control influence for having played a major role in the control and epistemological development of the Chinese people. And they had a religious role, if you want, during the last centuries of their existence. At the top vertex of the triangle, you have the three books on rituals that are considered as one. The three books are the Zhou Li, the ritual of the Zhou, the Li Ji, the records on the rituals of the rites, and the Li Yi's, etiquette and ceremonies. And at the top, you have the Chun Chu, which is a historical chronicles of the Lu Principality. Lu Principality is the principality where Confucius was born. And that chronicle that was useful philosophically was restricted to the period from 722 BCE to 482 BCE, simply because Confucius died in 479 BCE. The archivists of the Lu Principality kept on the register till the destruction of that principality in 249 BCE, but the philosophical content by Confucius stopped in 482 because he died in 479 BCE. That Chun Chu has three major philosophical interpretation. The first one is called the Zhuo interpretation, Z-U-O, from a guy named Mr. Zhuo, simply that. And it was more about geopolitics, court intrigues, and military battles, and political maneuvers as we understand politics, okay? The second interpretation is the Guliang interpretation. It's written G-U-L-I-A-N-G. In the Pinyin transliteration system, the G is pronounced as a K. So even if it's G, it's Guliang. And it's simply a guy named Guliang. And that interpretation was much more centered on rituals. But here you have to understand rituals not as robotic imitation or stupid repetition. Okay, rituals is when your behavior is the true shining forth of your inner understanding of infinite awareness according to the 6 stages as symbolized by the 6 lines of the hexagram. Okay, and last but not least, the third and most important interpretation, philosophical interpretation of the Chun Chu is the Gongyang interpretation according to Mr. Gongyang, written G-O-N-G-Y-A-N-G. And in that Gongyang interpretation, Confucius is not only seen as an aristocrat, teacher of rituals, but a philosopher king, meaning a man having a broad vision of reality and having prepared and synthesized the control legacy of the Zhou dynasty into an epistemological program that I symbolize by the square of the house, right? Because as I said, the school of the scholars, the Rujia, existed 1,000 years before the birth of Confucius, and Confucius was born in 551, to remind everyone of the data. Around 500, he synthesized that legacy of the Zhou dynasty for the future generations, and that was a success because Confucius was an absolute failure, politically speaking, during his time. But as an educator and as a major step of Chinese civilization, he was a complete success because his synthesis around 500 BCE of the control legacy of the Zhou dynasty endure for the next 2,000 years, meaning will endure or even 25 centuries, because before the creation of the first empire in 221 BCE, between 500 BCE and 200 BCE, his school existed and was operational, if I may say so, in the different principalities before the creation of the empire, reuniting all the principalities. So his control success lasted for at least 25 centuries, and I would say more, because it is still in operation. So, and at that top, let's not forget that if you see the house with the square and the triangle, the rights are just under the three interpretation of the Chun Chus, meaning that the rights means that the right behavior of the gentleman having gone through his epistemological development has a consequence on universal history, right? Because the Kongyang interpretation of the Chun Chu means that the direction of history is from the attitude of my is right to the attitude of my serving right or my serving justice. And for having that society or that everlasting civilization within which the general attitude is not my is right, but my servant right, we need to create as many as possible gentlemen. The Chinese word is Chunzi. Chun means Lord, and Zi is the son. The son of a lord is a gentleman. Before Confucius, Chunzi was an expression simply naming a man who was born into the hereditary nobility. From Confucius, Chunzi, the gentleman, meant a man born into the hereditary nobility, but also, and more importantly, the high-minded man having digested the classical education and having elevated his mind, his heart, and his soul to the attitude of a true aristocratic man, not an aristocratic man born into an aristocratic family, but an aristocratic man because he wants to serve justice. And he has developed his mind at a deep enough level to be capable to serve justice, because the three upper lines of the hexagram correspond to the three timeless forms of beauty, goodness, and truth in timelessness. And beauty in time correspond to the mind powers capable to serve justice. And goodness in time correspond to the mind's power capable to have valor and humanity. And truth in time, once again, correspond to the mind powers capable to embody wisdom. Okay, so for serving justice, you need to be valorous, to be wise, and to embody humanity, of course. So those are the three upper lines of the hexagram, and the group of the three upper lines of the hexagram is called the upper trigram. Okay, trigram for three lines, of course. And the three lower lines, called the lower trigram, of course, correspond to the line developments of the animal kingdom. And the first line is the senses perception. The second line of the animal kingdom is the intellect, meaning the capacity to use words, articulate language, numbers, concepts, and images. So that is part of our brain, our human brain, and that is called the intellect. The second lines of the mind development within the animal kingdom are called by the Chinese the lower trigram. And the third line, which is the highest line within the animal kingdom, is called social sophistication. Okay, it's also called in the West the psyche. The psyche is what? The psyche is an inchoate soul, because the soul is the fourth line. Okay, in terms of timelessness, this is beauty. In terms of time, it is justice embodied. So from here, I think that I gave enough what I would call a general introduction to the place of the Yi Jing within Chinese classical education, which has been the classical education during the 20 centuries or the 2 millennia of China imperial era. Okay, because I don't want to explain the I Ching in a kind of emptiness. You have to understand that the I Ching is the first Confucian classic, the triangle. That's why the I Ching is put at the center of the house, at the roof of the house. On the left side, you have the Book of Songs. On the right side, you have the Book of Documents. At the top, you have the 3 books on rituals and the 3 philosophical interpretations of the Chunchu, Spring and Autumn, one on rituals, the other on geopolitics, and the third on universal history, the most important. Because you have to understand the I Ching as a book of wisdom serving to create the gentleman. And the gentleman is the essential ingredient to create the everlasting civilization. The everlasting civilization is the civilization within which Mai is serving justice. Now, I would like to go into the I Ching by itself. The I Ching, as I said maybe 20 minutes ago, is a book that is made by 2 parts. The core part, the Zhou Yi, is 4,400 characters, and the philosophical explanation, the Shu Yi, or the 10 wings, is on epistemological, ontological, and cosmological consideration, and it's 20,100 Chinese characters. Now, I would like to do something practical, and I want to show again, okay, the 11 hexagram, 3 plain lines, 1, 2, 3, and 3 broken lines, 4, 5, 6, and on the right side, the character Wang for king. The first horizontal character for king, the bottom horizontal character, correspond to line 1 and 2 of the hexagram. The middle horizontal character of the character king correspond to lines 3 and 4 of the hexagram. And the top horizontal lines of the character king correspond to lines 5 and 6 of the hexagram. And the vertical line of the character king is the symbol for the ascension to infinite awareness, because infinite awareness is what is putting together the 3 levels of ascension, if you take the character Wang, or the 6 layers of ascension, if you use the hexagram, okay? Because if you remember only this, you understand the I Ching, okay? I took I make the effort to show that during about 30 seconds, because remember that everything that I will explain is about that. Okay, so I would like to enter into, yes, there are some historical considerations about the fact that the Yi Jing probably has been created by Fuxi, F-U-X-I, not the I Ching, but the hexagram and the trigram, a legendary leader having lived around 3000 BCE, okay? But please take it as a fairy tale, okay? It's not important. What is important is what happened between 1000 BCE and the creation of the empire, 221 BCE. Because in 1046 BCE, King Wen of the Zhou dynasty began to give some judgment called Tuan in Chinese about the I Ching, because I was speaking of the Zhou Yi, okay, which is the core document of the I Ching, 4,400 characters. What is in the Zhou Yi? First, you have the 64 hexagrams. You have the name of each of the 64 hexagrams. You have the judgment on the hexagram, and you have the judgment on the image of the hexagram. What do you mean? What do I mean by the image of the hexagram? Once again, I show the hexagram number 11. The image is that what is called the great image is that you would have a judgment on the first three lines, the lower trigram, and you have a judgment on the upper trigram, lines 4, 5, 6. But you also have what is called the small images. And here, the small images is a judgment on each of the 6 lines. Okay, that is what is called the big, the ta xiang, the big, the ta xiang chuang. So the tradition, the explanation on the great images, meaning on the lower trigram and the upper trigram, and the xiao xiang chuang, the explanation on each of the 6 lines of the hexagrams. So it's wing number 3 and number 4 about the big and the small images, and 3 and 4 is about the judgment on the commentary on the judgment, and wing 5 and 6 is about the great images and the small images. Okay, and those 4 are the most important. That being said, I want to go to something more practical. So now you remember one of the 64 hexagram. I chose a Thai supreme peace. Can be any one, of course. Okay, can be the 6 ohm plain lines, which is the first one, or the second one, broken lines. Okay, the 6 ohm broken lines. So I chose the number 11 and the character Wa. And now I would like to do something at the same time very practical and very theoretical to discuss with you the I Ching epistemologically and cosmologically. Okay, because when I say that the I Ching is at the center of the Chinese classical education, it was to explain the 6 layers of the mind, as I explained, the sense perception, the intellect, the psyche, beauty, goodness, and truth. We have also Chinese words for those stuff, but I don't use the Chinese words, but because there are so many notions to remember that I would take the English words, okay? Because it's better to understand than to give too many Chinese words that you wouldn't forget anyway, and you can very easily go on the internet to get the Chinese words nowadays or during the question period also. So, sense perception, intellect, psyche, beauty, goodness, and truth. That is the part of the epistemological development. In the Analects by Confucius in paragraph 2.4, Confucius would use symbolic ages to represent that mind development. Okay, so line 1, he would say that at 15 years old, I devote myself to start to learning. At line 2, at 30 years old, I take my stand in society. At line 3, at 40 years old, I'm no more confused. In the sense I'm no more confused, you have to understand that I'm no more naive. I know how to navigate within my society. Okay, I'm street smart. I'm street wise. But also, I am no more confused. Also means that I know that there's not only the lower trigram. There is also what is called the upper trigram. Okay, if I want to make a Western rapprochement, the lower trigram is the cave, and the upper trigram is the process to get out of the cave using Book 7 of the Republic by Plato and the allegory of the cave. And at line 4, Confucius would say, at 50 years old, I begin to hear the will of heaven. At line 5, I am capable to hear the will of heaven without complaining. So I'm more centered, more unwavering in infinite awareness. And at line 6, at 70 years old, I'm capable to do what I want without infringing the universal law, meaning that I am at infinite awareness, and what I want corresponds perfectly to the universal will. Okay, so it is infinite awareness. Okay, and that explanation is the epistemological explanation. But now I would like with the 50 here it's the yarrow stick. Okay, so it's the yarrow is a kind of wood that is used to make the stick for drawing the lots of the Yi Jing. There are 50 of them. Why 50? Because you have 5, of course, okay? And 5 is 55 times 10. 10 is the symbol of the totality for the Chinese. 5, it's because you have 5 phases, okay? Or elements, okay? Meaning you have wood, fire, earth, gold or metal, and finally water. But of course, those elements, you please don't understand those elements in a elementary meaning, okay? Those means the cycles. So the first easy way to understand the cycle of 5 is with the seasons, okay? Wood is not dead wood. Wood is green wood, okay? So it means the spring. After that, you have fire, which is summer. Earth is the middle of summer. Metal or gold, because in Chinese, Jing means gold and metal. Okay, so gold is nice because it reminds you of the beautiful colors of the leaves in fall and autumn. So I wouldn't say gold. Okay, gold for autumn or fall, and water for winter. That is the basic way to understand. But those seasons of nature is also the seasons of a man. Okay, we all say the spring of a man, the summer of a man, the winter of a man. But at the third layer of understanding, it is also the development of the mind of man. Okay, we all have a spring of our mind, we all have a winter of our mind, we all have a summer of our mind. What is special here is that you all know the expression that is used in Zen meditation about the minds of the beginner. Contrary to, as it is desirable to stay in a forever spring in our physical body, it is also desirable to stay in a forever spring for our mind. So it is not that we reject the summer or the fall or the winter of our mind, but the idea is also how we can be free in those phases of our mind, okay? Because if we have a linear progression, like the body, we know that for the physical body, we would have a spring, a summer, a fall, and a winter. And at the end of the winter, the body wouldn't drop, we wouldn't die physically. But for the mind, it is not necessarily the case, because we have a spring, a summer, a fall, a winter. But if we can keep our inner identity in infinite awareness, maybe our mind would have a new spring. So you have to keep in mind that in terms of mind, it is not linear like the physical body, because common sense and science make us understand that we all have a body that will be finished one day, but it's not the same in terms of mind. And at the fourth layer of understanding, it is also the life of a civilization, okay? And the life of a civilization also has, a direct correlation with the mind. Because if you remember the house that I explained as the basic understanding of the Chinese classical education, the epistemological development for creating as many gentlemen as possible is to create the everlasting civilization. So if you manage to create as many gentlemen as possible, you will be capable to renew your nation, your civilization, each time that this civilization would enter into a phase of autumn, of winter. Because some civilization, sadly, when they enter into fall or into winter, will truly die forever. Okay, those who are readers of history know very well that sadly, some civilization were born, became developed, and die for never to return again. But if you have the ambition for your civilization to be an everlasting civilization, the main understanding and the main teaching and the main lesson of the Chinese classical education, if you would have to create as many gentlemen or as many junzi, to use the Chinese word, as possible at each generation, that would maintain that civilization always in an everlasting spring. And what is not possible for the physical body is possible for the mind, and is possible for the everlasting civilization, because the everlasting civilization is only the reflection of the minds of the aristocratic man living within that everlasting civilization. It doesn't mean that it won't have moments of autumn, moments of winter, but if you have enough, always a core number, if I may say so, of gentlemen, of aristocratic men, to use Plato's expression, those aristocratic men in the midst of fall and winter will be capable to bring back spring for that civilization. That being said, I want to go to the cosmological perspective. I want to say that first, I want to say the 6 lines of the cosmological perspective corresponding exactly to the 6th line of the hexagram and corresponding exactly to the 6 stages of the epistemological dimension. Contrary to the epistemological dimension, I start with the 6th line for the cosmological perspective, so the highest. So in Chinese, it's You Wu Qi Sheng You Qi, Wu Qi Sheng You Qi. Qi is a Chinese word, means the beam, meaning the piece of wood that is at the center of the roof. Okay, that is the main piece of wood maintaining the balance of the roof. Okay, Qi. But metaphorically, you have to understand here as principles. Okay, so of form. So Wu Qi means without form or the formless. Wu Qi Sheng You Qi. So the formless or infinite awareness creates the 3 timeless form, or better, creates D1. Okay, because D1 is also 3, of course. So I show you the 50, because 50 is 5 times 10. 10 is the totality, and 5 is the symbol for the phases of nature, of man, of mind, and of everlasting civilization. Okay, so here is the whole reality. When you start to use the Yaru stick, you remove 1. Okay, so that is exactly what I just said. When you don't see the 50 Yaru sticks, it means Wu Qi, the formless. Okay, you don't see nothing. Now, Wu Qi Sheng You Qi, the one, the whole reality, manifesting, infinite awareness. And the second line, that is the 6th line, okay, cosmologically speaking. Now I go to the 5th line, cosmologically speaking. You Ji Sheng Tai Ji. Okay, Tai Ji means the supreme form, but here I said that the formless creates the one. The second line is the one manifests as 3. Okay, You Ji Sheng Tai Ji. And the movement with that is You Ji Sheng Tai Ji. Okay, the one manifests as three. I put it aside, okay, to remember that is the fifth line. And now I go to the fourth line. Tai Chi Sheng Liang Yi. Okay, the three, the three timeless form, beauty, goodness, and truth, creates the two polarities. And in terms of movement, I use the left hand and the left thumb to separate them into two unequal parts, okay? The two poles, Liang Yi, Yin and Yang. Why the left thumb? Because the left is the honorable side in China. When the emperor sits on his throne, he's facing south. And when you face south, the north is in your back, and the east is in your left side. And the east is the side of the rising sun. Okay, so that's why the left side is the honorable side in China, in the east, contrary to the west, because in the west, the left in Latin is sinister. So the left is not honorable and the right is dexter. So the right is honorable. But when you have the explanation for the west and the east, you understand why the left is the honorable side for the east and the right is the honorable side for the west. So now that we have the two polarities, you will have, I repeat, Wu Qi Sheng You Qi, formless create the one. You Qi Sheng Tai Qi, the one manifests as three, beauty, goodness, and truth. And Tai Qi Sheng Liang Yi, the three timeless form manifests in time as two polarities, yin and yang. Okay, so that is cosmologically the upper trigram, 6, 5, 3. Now we go to the lower trigram, 3, 2, 1. Liang Yi Sheng Si Xiang. Okay, so it means the two polarities manifest into the four images. And the four images is the perfect yang, the perfect yin, the small yang, and the small yin. Okay, so you have four basic situations in which you either have a complete yang, complete yin, or a small yang or small yin. Okay, graphically, the perfect yang is two plain lines, the perfect yin is two broken lines. The small yang is you have a broken line at the bottom and the plain line at the top. And the small yin is you have the plain line at the bottom and the broken line at the top. And finally, and Si Xiao Sheng Pa Gua. Okay, the four images will create the 8 trigrams. And finally, and Papa Liu Shu Su Hua, meaning that 8 trigrams by 8 trigrams will give the famous 64 hexagrams. Okay, so cosmologically speaking, 3, 2, 1 is timelessness manifesting into time. Then I would like to create the first line of any hexagram together with you. You remember that I separate the 49 yarrow stick in 2. The one here has been, this one is symbolizing the 1. So we have 49 in 2. The left package, I left it there. I take 1 in the right package, I put it here. And I remove 4 at the time. 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. I have a remaining of 2. I put it here. The right package. 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. I have 5. I will explain what we will do with that 5. First question, why do I remove 4 at the time? Why not 3? Why not 1? Why 4? Because it's to remind to remind the king. Okay? In the king, you have 4 lines. 3 horizontal plus 1 vertical. I would like to make a rapprochement because it's important for me. Because it's for me, it's the universality of all high civilizations. In India, you have the symbol for Okay, so you have O in the Brahmi script. You have the curve for M, and you have the Chandra Bindu. Okay, the is also 4. Okay, because you have A, U, M, 1, 2, 3, and the Chandra Bindu is called the 4th, Turiya, or for the eternal witness, Sakshi. Okay, Anidam Chaitanyam. Wow, the king here. You have 1, 2, 3 horizontal lines is for A-U-M, and the vertical line for infinite awareness is for the Chandra Bindu. Okay, so it is also infinite awareness as the Chandra Bindu. That's why we remove 4 at each time. It is to remember infinite awareness. And 5 in the system correspond. If you have 5 yarrow stick as a remainder, those 5 yarrow stick correspond to 3, and I will explain to you why. Symbolically, 3 is 1, right? 3 is for beauty, goodness, and truth. That is 5 equal to 3 because that 1 manifests in the 5 faces of wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. So that is why you have that association. Now I take everything that is in remainder. I do it one again, I separate. I keep 1 from the right package. I remove 4 at each time. 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. I still have 1 as the remainder. I keep it here. I take the right side package. 4, 4, 4. Okay, so I have 4 as remainder. As with 5, 4 is also equal to 3. Okay, why? Once again, the king is for the totality, is also equal to 3 for the totality, is also equal to the 1. Okay, so we have 5 and 4, meaning 3 and 3. Okay, and we will do it a last time for the first line. I will not do the 6 lines. I just want to make a demonstration to you how we can get a line of the hexagram. If we have to do a whole hexagram, we will have to repeat the operation 18 times, okay? Because for each line, you have to perform 3 times. Why do we take so much time? Because to draw with the yarrow sticks is a way to do meditation, okay? If you do it very slowly, in a very respectful manner, it is a way for you to go back to infinite awareness. And you know the lazy way to do it, eh? The lazy way to do it is to toss 3 coins. And if you toss 3 coins, if you have the heads, it's equal to 3. Heads for it's normal, okay? Heads is for the fountain head, so it's normal is equal to 3, the 1, and then you have the tails is equal to 2. That's the easy way that it takes 3 seconds to do it. If you do it with the yarrow sticks, it takes about 10 minutes. So to do the 6 lines, seriously, you have to take about an hour. And of course, you have to think seriously to the validity, to the quality of your question, because you don't do that just for fun. Okay, you have to question first. So we will do the last time for the first line. Again, I separate in 2. I take it here. I remove 4 at the time to remember infinite awareness. 4, 4, 4, 4. So I have a remainder of 2, 4, 4, 4, 4. Okay, so I have 5. So 5, you remember that the other one is you got is 5, 4, and 5. So 5 and 4 all equals to 3. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9. Okay, it would be equivalent to a tossing of 3 coins that you would get 3 heads, for example. Okay, so 9. 9 correspond to a plain line yang, but mutable. Okay, because it means that you wouldn't get 2 hexagrams. The first original one would the first one would be a plain line, but you have a second hexagram that is created by the fact that 9 is a mutable yang. So the second hexagram, the first line would start with a broken line. Okay, that's why when you get a 9, it's mean that yet a mutable yang. When you get an 8, it's mean a yin, not mutable, a simple yin. When you get a 7, it means a yang, a plain line, but not mutable. And when you get a 6, it means a mutable yin, broken line, meaning becoming a yang. Okay. And so we got our first line, which is a plain line with a symbol X, meaning it is mutable. And if you want to complete the hexagram, you would have to do it 5 times again, or 15 times again. Once again, what I just performed is equivalent to 3 seconds of tossing 3 coins. What I want to say is that I want to go into some principle to maybe make one understand deeper those manipulations, because I understand perfectly that it's not necessarily absolutely clear. And we will have the pleasure to exchange in the second hour and next week to make it deeper. Okay. So I said to you that there are 9 principles, and I would say that I wouldn't go through those 9 principles tonight. So I did not do certain things, but I think I can do it next time. And I want to take maybe the next 10 to 15 minutes to talk about those 9 principles, and to take the last 45 minutes to 60 minutes for exchange, because I would say that it will deepen many things in the exchange. Okay, so the first principles, I said it half an hour ago. All things are between heaven and earth. Okay, so for the third to the fourth time, I show you the hexagram number 11 and the character Wang. Okay, because the bottom horizontal character represent earth, and the top horizontal character symbolize heaven. And there's a stuff here that is called a kaiwan, that is used in Chinese culture for steeping tea and drinking tea. I think Shrikant, you already know it. The saucer is for earth, the cup is for man, and the cover is for heaven. Okay. That is the top horizontal line, the middle horizontal line, and the bottom horizontal line. But here, the vertical line is symbolized by what? The vertical line is symbolized by the tea that is poured into man. Because tea in Chinese culture symbolize awareness. Okay, let's not forget that the vertical line of king is for infinite awareness. And that is why the cup is normally empty, because man has to empty his inferior emotions in order to receive the nectar, the divine liquor from heaven. Okay, infinite awareness. So once again, I repeat the first principles. All things are between the poles of heaven and earth. The second principle can be separated in three. 2a, the principle of all being is the Tao. 2b, the Tao is the constant interaction of the heavenly positive pole yang and the earthly negative pole yin. 3c, the Tao is the constant alternation of the heavenly positive pole yang and the earthly negative pole yin. So it is interaction, but also alternation, right? And the principle of all being is the Tao. Principle 3, this polarity is understood essentially as hot or soft, light and darkness, male, female, plus, minus, rising, declining, waxing, waning. But last but not least, proactive and reactive, okay? And here we come to the center of that education in 2 words, okay? All the classical education of China and of the East, and I would be as bold, even if I'm not Indian from origin, but Srikan can correct me, I would be as bold as to say that it would include also the center of the Indian classical education is the 2 words Wu Wei, okay? Translated as non-action, but I think that every one of you understand that non-action doesn't mean that you don't act. It's not that, okay? Non-action means that you act, but center on infinite awareness, okay? And not center on your small self, on your motivations, because Wei means intention, motivated, goal-oriented, okay? Goal-oriented, motivated by what? From what? Okay, from your small self, from your inferior emotions, but also from your superior emotions, okay? Of course, you have to have a cleaning of your inferior emotions before you are capable to receive the heavenly teaching, okay, as symbolized by the pouring of the tea. But even when the tea is being received, you still have the superior emotions. And those superior emotions, which are very useful for building the everlasting civilization, of course, because epistemologically, it corresponds to line 4, which is the democratic man, to use Plato words, or the xian, to use the Chinese word, corresponding to the power of justice, meaning the man having that mind's development at the level that they have the mind powers to uphold justice. Okay, that is what it means. And line 5, the aristocratic man, or the Chunzi, are the men and the women, of course. So please, for the women, don't blame me to say man. Okay, when I say man, it means man and women. I think that we all understand each other. Okay, so at line 5, those are the people, the man capable to have the mind powers, to be creative, to have valor, to have inventivity, to have discovery. And those men contribute a lot, of course, to the creation and the maintenance, if I may use the word maintenance, of the everlasting civilization. But the sixth line, okay, the line of the philosopher king, the line of the Shengren, as the Chinese say that, or the true man, or what the Indians call the Buddha, is the line of the being having complete and infinite awareness. Okay, those men are very useful for all the universe and for the everlasting civilization, but on the practical level, they are no more really useful for the everlasting civilization, because the truly active man for the everlasting civilization are truly the men at 4 and 5, especially at 5. Okay, because in traditional China, if you have a true fair society, those who have their mind development at line 1 would be the commoners. Those at the line 2 would be the petty officers. Those at line 3 would be the officers. Those at line 4 would be the ministers. Those at line 5 would be the sovereigns. So you see that all the society is complete from 1 to 5, from the commoners to the sovereign. So what is the use of the guy at number 6? He's useful for all the universe and for all the reality and for all the construction of the everlasting civilization based on the powers of the mind. Because once again, we go back to the basic problem of ethics, okay? True morality is not repeating like a parrot the principles of morality. Because if you try to brainwash someone with the moral principles, for example, that person will memorize and will repeat like a parrot, and that memorization will go to line 2, okay, the intellect. And if he's a hypocrite and he has social sophistication, he will offer a beautiful face, but he will do bad things behind your back. Okay, so it's not a way to build the everlasting civilization, because it is simply fabricating robots, parrots, and hypocrites. The only way that you will be capable to make the everlasting civilization is to give the classical education, so that the person reach to the mind powers of 4 and 5 when they have enough awareness to be truly what they pretend to be in order of morality, of creativity, and of fairness. And the philosopher king at the last level of mind development is infinite awareness. Of course, he's an absolute dance for the universe. And I'm sure that he contributes to the everlasting civilization, because he influenced directly the aristocratic man and the democratic man. I don't remember the stanza, but Lao Tzu say that you have 3 kinds of scholars. The kind that when he listened to the Tao, he will immediately be capable to understand and to do something practical about that lesson. That is the aristocratic man listening to the philosopher king. And you have a second category. You have the people when that they wouldn't listen to the teaching of the Tao. Sometimes they will be sure and they will do it immediately. Sometimes they are not sure, okay? Because they did not really, truly, deeply understand. That is the democratic man, the 4th line, listening to the philosopher king or to the aristocratic man. And you have a 3rd kind of scholars that when they listen to the Tao, they would laugh incredibly, okay? Because they don't understand or they find it completely absurd. Well, that is the hypocrite, okay? The 3rd line, the guy having social sophistication and having a good intellect that makes him capable of understanding intellectually, But beware of the hypocrite, because he will show you a beautiful face, but he will do something else behind your back. And that is why it is so important that the classical education is deeply understood to create as many democratic men, Timocratic, and aristocratic man as possible. Because once again, Confucius created, he did not create it. It is the cultural legacy of the Zhou royal house, or the Qi royal house, because their family name is Qi, J-I, or the Zhou dynasty. But around 500 BCE, Confucius synthesized it in a practical manner that I explained to you with the house, the square and the rectangle. It was the way that I learned it when I was a child in my family. So I repeat what I have learned simply to you. And it is precisely that adventure into infinite awareness that will create those absolutely needed democratic and aristocratic man to create the beautiful, just, and everlasting civilization. So I will stop my formal presentation here, and I would suggest that we go on the Q&A session, and I hope that we will have a beautiful interactive session.
Excellent. So I have tons of questions, but I'm going to give priority to everybody else first. So folks, if you have questions, go ahead and ask questions. Let's start with questions. What would you like to know? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. We will have time for comments later on, but right now, just let's focus on questions just to clarify. You know, it's a Quan has put so much on the table, you know, really the core of I Ching. It's a great presentation. So go ahead and question. So we'll start with Ali. Ali, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, so great talk. A lot to pack. There was a lot to well understand. So a quick question is, how would you differentiate the Western epistemology from the I Ching epistemology? In what ways they are different?
I would say that epistemologically there is no difference. It is rather cosmologically that there might be some difference, and I explain to you why. I learned the classical education when starting at 3 years old within my family when I was in Hong Kong. And I started the classical Western education within my family too in Hong Kong when I was 7 years old. Okay. And when I compare the dialogues by Plato and what is taught by Confucius, there's no difference, because if you go to the chapter 7 of the Republic, which is the synthesis of the epistemological development as Plato explained it, you also have the 6 lines of the epistemological development. So Plato would call the Xian, the democratic man. So that's why I mix the 2 languages. He would call the Junzi, the aristocratic man, and he would call the Shengren, the philosopher king. And he would use a Greek word for the sense perception that is in Chinese is called qi, and Plato would say akasia, okay, meaning the shadows, one. The Chinese for line 2 would say zhu for the intellect, and Plato would say akasia 2 for the intellect, and line 3 by the Chinese is called sin, the heart mind, and or the inchoate soul or the psyche, and Plato would say the pistis or the conventional truth, okay, which is the level of the psyche. So for me, epistemologically, there is no difference if you know Chinese classical education and you know Western education. I mentioned Plato for a very simple reason, because I agree with Alfred North Whitehead, who wrote or who said that all Western civilization are only a footnote to Plato's dialogues.
Thank you. All right, folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark to ask questions or raise your hand in Zoom. Next up is Nick.
Yes, thanks. I'll phrase my question by the segue of Ali's question. So what do you think that the Western epistemology, the mainstream, of course, search for the certainty of the truth. So emphasis is placed on necessity, while the I Ching thought emphasizes on changes. And this is emphasizing changes slightly different from the Heraclitus emphasis on changes, because even Heraclitus seeks to search the eternal truth underlining changes. But the I Ching and the Chinese thought seems to emphasize on this ever-changing change contingency, the 64 contingencies coming out of those hexagrams. So, how do you think the implication of that? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your very interesting question. Okay, because that question is at the core of my presentation. Once again, I would like to remind my metaphor for Chinese culture. Okay, Shrika know it. It's the tree. Okay, the root of the trees are the hexagram and the I Ching. The trunk of the tree is Confucianism and Taoism, and the big branches are the Chinese authors and the foreign authors. Plato reconciled Heraclitus, who emphasized change, and Parmenides, who emphasized the one. Okay, because for Parmenides, only the one is, the rest is hallucinations. For Heraclitus, only change is. I would like to remind you that Chinese civilization thinks the same, because what did I say at the beginning of my presentation? That I Ching means the classic of change, but also means the classic of what? Of the unchanged. Okay, so it is true that in the mainstream perception of the Yi Ching, most of the time people would put the stress on the changes. You are not wrong. I agree with you. But if you truly understand the Chinese classical education, the Chinese classical education maintain that there is a timelessness, Wu Ji, timelessness, okay, infinite awareness, Wu Ji, Sheng You Ji, the one, and the many. And I should put this that way because it's disrespectful to hold the one with the right hand. You should hold it with the left hand. Okay, the one and the many. Okay, Wu Ji Sheng You Ji, You Ji Sheng Tai Ji. The one manifests as the three timeless form of beauty, goodness, and truth. And why I say that, I stop here, because if you analyze, okay, I will see it. I will take 5 seconds to send to the chat a character, okay, so everyone can see it. No, it's not that. It's in. Okay, chat. Okay, chat. Okay, my apologies, because my tablets only have the simplified system of Chinese characters, and it's only with the traditional Chinese characters that is interesting. So I will explain it without the character. Okay, the word Jing in Chinese for classic in traditional graph. On the left, you have the symbol for way, okay, for moving, okay. And on the right, you have the symbol for head, for fountainhead. That is the Tao, okay? And so you have time and timelessness. That is Tao and not Jing. Jing, you have on the left time, which is symbolized by the symbol for silk. And on the right, you have the symbol for a loom, okay, the machine for weaving. That character have 3 chevrons. The 3 chevrons symbolize the one manifesting as 3. Beauty, goodness, and truth. Okay? So when you talk of classic, it is the same than to talk of timelessness. It is, okay, thank you, Kevin. Kevin just sent to the chat the character Jing in traditional graph. So on the left, you see silk, and the right, you see the character for loom, and you identify very easily the 3 chevron, okay? The 3 chevron is for beauty, goodness, and truth. That is the one manifesting as 3. So I did not forget the question, the excellent question by Nick. It is only the mainstream superficial understanding of the Yi Jing that would ascribe to the Yi Jing the understanding of reality has only changed. I am overbearing enough and confident enough to say to you, the Chinese are taking also into account timelessness, as symbolized by the character Jing for classic or timelessness or eternity, and as symbolized by the character Tao. Okay, because in Tao, the Jing, is also can be separated in 2, and on the left side is for moving time, and the right side of is the heart directed to what is right, timelessness. So once again, Tao, the cover, the virtue of man, Jing, the classic of the way and of virtue, okay? Infinite awareness. And once again, I want to show it again. King, Wang, Tao, Jing, the vertical lines for infinite awareness. So I maintain my answer to Ali. There is no difference, epistemologically speaking, between the West and the East if you truly know the Chinese classical education and if you truly know Plato. Why I limit myself to Plato? Because once again, I'm a Plato's lover. Because I believe, like Whitehead, that all Western civilization is only footnotes to Plato, and everything that Plato dreamed, the Westerner did not achieve. They have a lot to achieve before achieving everything that Plato imagined and dreamed in his 40 or so dialogues.
Wonderful. Thank you, Guan. I'm going to ask a clarificatory question. You know, in the final section, you talked about 9 principles, but I did not catch all of them. Can you run through the 9 principles again? And folks, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Go ahead.
Yes, you're right. And I'm very grateful to you because I stopped at principle 3.
Yes.
And so here's principle 4. The polarity produces archetypal figures seen in heaven as changing constellation and patterns, and on earth at geometric, geographical, and biological patterns. Principle 5. The archetypal figures can be traced analogically in all entities, and their flux gives rise to events, including birth, growth, and death. And here, when we say birth, growth, and death, it's not only the birth, growth, and death of human beings. It can also be the birth, growth, and death of stars, of planets, of the universe. Okay, so it's a kind to the day of Brahma and the Pralaya in the Indian thinking. The 6th principle is ancient sages were inspired to create the hexagrams as analogs to the archetypal figures, in which the 2 polarities are expressed by whole lines and broken lines, while flux is expressed by the changing places of the lines within the hexagram. 7, the sages added oracular statement or prognosis, indicating the changes to be expected in the lines and in analogous turns of event. 9, it is about to be guided, the guidance by the spirit, okay? In the Chinese civilization, believe in spirit. So outside of the yin-yang dance are the spirit, and they are capable of helping the person using the yarrow sticks by intervening in controlling the counting of the yarrow sticks, by which the figure, meaning the hexagram, analogous to any real situation, would be produced for ascertaining the situation. So 9 is the conclusion. The wise man accepts the Tao, and I remind everyone that the Tao, the two first principle, everything is between heaven and earth, and the Tao is the principle of all things, meaning the alternation and the interaction between the yin and the yang. So the wise man accepts the Tao and uses the hexagrams for helping himself making decisions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kwan. Really appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Beautiful summary. All right, folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand. At this point, if you want to make comments, you're welcome to do that as well. If nobody's speaking, I'm going to take the opportunity of talking about the king. That's the most interesting character for me. I'm going to use analogous thing from the West. To me, I see it as a Jacob's ladder. You know, the vertical is the Jacob's ladder because you have, it is one that is connecting all the layers, and it is flowing from top to the bottom and then bottom to top, and it's just back and forth. Is that analogy fair?
Absolutely. I was going to say that it is outstanding because it's obvious for me that in the Western tradition, the Jacob's ladder is obvious because of the vertical lines, horizontal lines, you think to a ladder, obviously.
Yeah.
And epistemologically is the same, of course.
Right, exactly. So angels coming down on Son of Man, on earth, and then going up from there. So that movement, so it captures, it's very profound because it is focusing. It's also, I want to connect it to the tea. You have to empty the pot because your pot is full of all kinds of 10,000 things. And if there is 10,000 things, there is no space there for the ladder or for the Tao to operate at all. And so you have to empty it, and then you it is through grace, that you get the Tao fully, because it just is what it is. And so you have to kind of keep yourself empty for it. So I think the illustration of the teacup is beautiful. So thank you so much. Also, the fact that tea is that it's a liquid, there is this movement, that is taking place. It is not a stick, it is tea. It is that it's something that is moving. It is liquid. It is moving from top to bottom. Thank you so much. Next up is Nick.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to comment on my own question. Obviously, the way I frame the question indicates I have a slight different take on the issue from Kwong, but doesn't mean who is right, who is wrong. So the way meaning, I would not say myself that the Western epistemology is the same as the Chinese epistemology, because the Yi Jing more or less is treated as a live document in the sense that when it was written 2,000 more years ago, and throughout the ages till today, scholars comment on it. And because the original text is just so dense, nobody could penetrate it to understand what is going on. And so generations after generations of scholars comment on it. And of course, different schools of thought get built into the interpretation of the Book of Changes. But one of the major comments made in later days after Confucius made the first commentary was that there is a lack of metaphysical, epistemological thoughts expressed in the original text. And there's a lot of moral teaching, a lot of divination, a lot of sort of the soothsaying. But later on, because of that lack of ontological or epistemological or metaphysical foundation of those wisdoms, later generations had to somewhat patch up together metaphysical interpretation of it, especially in the face of the introduction of Buddhism into China. And Buddhism clearly had a much sophisticated notion of the metaphysical foundations of the wisdom for life. And then the Chinese scholars felt they were losing the control of the narratives. So I just want to put that in. And then obviously conclusions that in that series of commentaries in building up the metaphysical foundation of the Book of Change, it is clearly have taken a different route than the development of Western metaphysical epistemological development, and therefore, give a slightly too strange of thoughts, which is good actually. But diversity is good. But I
Nick,
just want to put that in.
I would like to know, what do you mean by the original documents? Because I have an answer for you, but I want to know what you mean by the original documents. Do you mean the Zhou Yi, or you mean the 10 wings?
Zhou Yi plus the 10 wings. These were considered original, yeah.
Okay, because forgive me, but maybe you are not informed of the following. I will read you an English translation of an excerpt from the 10 wings, which come from the Shuokua, okay, meaning the number 8 of the 10 wings. Okay, it's section 5. It's a conversation between Confucius and Zikong. And I would like to remind everyone that the I Ching is made by 2 documents. The core documents of 4,400 characters is called the Zhou Yi, Z-H-O-U-Y-I, the change of Zhou. And that document is about 3,000 years old. Okay. The second document is called Shi Yi, or the 10 wings. It is the epistemological, cosmological, and ontological development on the core 4,400 characters. Nick is right when he says that in the original 4,400 characters from 3,000 years ago, there is no epistemological or ontological or cosmological considerations. But if Nick considers the 10 wings as part of the original documents, it has been written according to tradition by Confucius, so 25 centuries ago. Okay? And in that document called the 10 wings, which constitute 20,100 characters, you have epistemological, ontological, and cosmological considerations. So together, the 4,400 characters of the Zhou Yi plus the 20,100 characters of the Shi Yi, the 10 wings, the 2 stuff make the I Ching. Okay, and the I Ching is 24,500 characters. And I would like to read an English translation of a section of the 10 wings from 25 centuries ago, if we accept the tradition that Confucius wrote the 10 Wings entirely, there is a scholarly tradition who says that the 10 Wings has more been written between the 4th century BCE and the 3rd century BCE. So even if you think that it was not Confucius who wrote the 10 Wings, it's still a document that is 23 to 24 century old. So there is only a difference of 2 centuries between those who believe that Confucius wrote the 10 Wings completely and those who think that has been the creation of Confucianist scholars 2 centuries after Confucius. Okay, so I start the reading of the excerpt. It's a conversation between Confucius and one of his disciples, Zhou. Zhou said, does the master believe in divination using the yarrow sticks? Confucius, as for the book of change, I do indeed put its prayers and divinations last, only observing the teachings for achieving virtue and justice. So we are speaking here of epistemology and ontology. Having intuition to make an hexagram and understanding the hexagram for reaching virtue is to embody true humanity. Having true humanity is to put your true understanding into right action. So here is epistemology and ethics. If the hexagram does not lead to right action, then one acts as a magician, okay? Because the word that Confucius uses for the hypocrite, what Plato called the fake democratic man, the line 3, Confucius called him a magician. So if the hexagram does not lead to right action, then one's act as a scribe, okay? So the scribe, S-C-R-I-B-E, okay, is the word that Confucius used for the person at the second line of development of the animal kingdom, meaning the intellectual, okay? The people just repeating like a parrot what they learned, but they did not go into the epistemological development to develop their infinite awareness. So the definition of the scribes and of the magicians, so second and third line of epistemological development, tend towards it, but are not yet there. They lie in it, but are not correct. Not correct because not having the true infinite awareness of the upper trigram. Perhaps it would be because of the book of change that gentlemen of later generations will doubt me. I seek its teachings to achieve a true humanity and nothing else. Let's not forget that the fifth line in Chinese is called a ran in timelessness, okay? Or goodness, true goodness and true humanity. And that fifth line on 6 correspond to the Junzi, the aristocratic man, precisely. The man needed for the everlasting civilization. So I repeat, perhaps it would be because of the book of change that gentlemen of later generations will doubt me. I seek its teachings to achieve true humanity and nothing more. I am on the same road as the scribes and the magicians, but end up differently. The right behavior coming from the gentleman's true humanity is to seek blessings for all. That is why he sacrifices but little, in the sense that Confucius acknowledged that they are social conventions, that they are prayers, that they are sacrifices, but he wouldn't go along a little bit with the social conventions, but little, because the right behavior coming from the gentleman's true humanity is to seek blessings for all. The justice coming from his true humanity is to seek favorable configuration for his action. That is why he divides, but rarely. Okay, because once again, he considered that the manipulation of the yarrow sticks is a way to go along with social convention, but at a deeper level, is a method to enter into meditation, to empty your 1, 2, 3 layers of the mind, so you would be capable to receive the liquor of timelessness from heaven. So I insist, I know that sometimes I can be a bit overbearing, but I received that classical education in my childhood. It is absolutely the same with timelessness and with time. And each time that you hold this, you hold the whole reality. 无极生有极，有极生太极. Timelessness and time. And if you forgot everything that I just said, just remember that I Ching, the classic of change, should be translated as I Ching, the classic of the dance between timelessness and time, or the classic of the dance between change and the unchanged, or the classic of the dance between being and becoming. If I have to choose a right translation, which is not too long, I would say being and becoming, or the classic of being and becoming.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Quan. And, you know, many of these traditions are very different from modern times or modern interpretations of those same traditions. So I think it's tremendously valuable to kind of go back and, you know, retrieve and keep that going. So I think that's really, really like what you're doing. Next up is going to be David, followed by Jason. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to speak to the last speaker, but I think I may have forgotten the essence of his when I wrote a note down, because what he was suggesting, I think, was a difference between the original sources or source and what developed over time teaching it. And I wanted to just make an analogy or parallel to Western philosophy, some of the developments in the lack of metaphysical content in original documents in the West, like scripture as an original document. It is not a self-reflected intellectual examination of its own process. It gives no authority to its own critique or intellection or reason particularly. They're not really mentioned in it. In fact, it's more of a narrative of chronological feeling, you know, that this is what happened in this way, with a very shallow kind of explication of authority or in the rule system. Is just, you know, the rules and you see what happens. And it's almost never a reason is given why this rule should have been apparent to you. It's just the rule is given, you hear the rule, that's it. So that's really different from what spun out over time in the Western tradition. So the transparent account of acts and consequences never has a lesson in the scriptures as a side of, it's not the consequence per se, which is the lesson, but it was the sort of not paying attention to the underlying invisible, unstated principles in certain ways. For example, well, just sort of obedience per se in some cases. So you see that this system, when it's put into practice and people try to live by it, that it requires a lot of interpretation. It only spells out so much. And accounts of that produce essentially law cases and commentaries. And you talked about commentaries, and there are commentaries on commentaries, and there you get self-examination, intellectual reflections, and disputation, because, well, this was said, but this was said. Now you have resolutions using reasoning as sort of an essential authority in the process of knowing what to do. So the arguments show variance in readings of the original text. The underlying principles are always being turned over like, you know, soil to see where's the rich part and what's being added to it, or are we finding something that's really there? So it's a reconciliation by looking at what actions didn't turn out to really be the right action, not because the mere consequence, but underlying it was a principle that was corrupt. So you're looking for the unstated logic that's behind the whole writing. And this is sort of develops into a metaphysical, a literary principle of examining the text for the text speaking about itself in ways that wasn't apparent at first. And that's developed, at least in the Jewish tradition, first century already. There are rules about reading the text, and this contradicts this. Here's what you have to do to find out what's going on, until the 9th century, where there's like at least 13 rules of two things are stated. One's a major case, the minor case that sounds similar. It's a limitation, but not a restriction on other things, you know. So becomes a very much intellectual and reason-based. You're forced to respect reason as an authority. And then that spills out in the Enlightenment in a really fundamental way. But that's a change in authority from the original scripture. Sort of interesting how that plays out in the West. I wonder if you find it has a parallel. Sounds like it sort of does have parallels. Thanks, Juan.
Well, thank you very much for your rich comment, David, because I would like to offer 3 rapprochements, okay? And the main concept that you offer is that first you have rituals, and second you have philosophical thinking and elaboration, epistemological elaboration on the rituals. When King Wen of Zhou, around 3,000 years ago, noted down his first philosophical reflection, the rituals that were using metallic rod that are heated, and to put that heated metallic rod on the plastron of a tortoise to read the crack on the plastron, that is the ritual phase, okay? And that ritual phase go back into prehistory, okay? I can easily say 5,000 years before 5,000 BCE. And the rapprochement that I would make is with the Indian Rig Veda, for example, okay? In the Indian Rig Veda, you have all kinds of very sophisticated rituals that are detailed, and the Samaveda, the Yago Veda, and etc. That would correspond, in my mind, to 1,000 BCE for the Chinese text, okay, the 4,400 characters. Because in that core 4,400 characters, you have only the judgment, the name of the hexagram, okay, and the guys know how to do with the rituals. 5 centuries later, you have the Shi Yi, the 10 wings. And in that Shi Yi, you have epistemological, cosmological, and ontological speculation and affirmation, because the short dialogue, the conversation that I read between Confucius and Zhou is 500 centuries later. I know that the Rig Veda is difficult, but let's say, according to the scholars nowadays, and I know that it can be disputed, the Rig Veda is considered maybe 1,200 BCE, 1,500 BCE. Okay, let's accept 1,200 BCE, right? The Upanishad is around 800 BCE. So between the Rig Veda, 1,300 to 1,200, and the Upanishad, you have a time period of 4 to 5 centuries. Okay, so between the rituals and the philosophical understanding and elaborations, you have half a millennium. That was the case of what happened in China, okay? Between the core Zhou Yi, 4,400 characters, that we can say around 1,050 BCE, and the Shi Yi, the 10 wings, 20,100 characters, 5 centuries later, you have the same adventure from rituals to philosophy, from ritual to epistemology, ontology, and cosmology. The only thing that the Yi Jing is a document made of a stuff that is 3,000 years ago, and a stuff that is 2,500 years ago. And the two documents are put together and are called the Yi Jing, except that the two parts are very clearly separated. They are not mixed. So you can see the ritualistic aspect, and you can see the epistemological, cosmological, and ontological aspect, as if the Indian scholars decide one day to put the Vedas and the 108 Upanishad together. It would be a gigantic book. It would be the Indian I Ching for me.
Can I just say something on that? It's so interesting. So the way it is developed in the Jewish written tradition is they are looking at the one scroll that is the central text. And then when they're forced to stop teaching orally because of the destruction of their civilization and they have to, go into exile, there's a central core of teachings. When that's eventually printed, so that's put at the center. And then the commentary on it, as you said, is totally separate, put underneath it. And then every 100 years around the edges is another border until there are 4 sets of borders representing the next 4 generations. They're each teaching about what's already on the page, and everything is preserved in its distinction. And in the back, there's a kind of an ongoing commentary on how that's going. So it's very cool that it's kind of like what you're talking about, keeping all those threads, because what you taught may not be what he taught, but know how you thought and how he thought. So you can comment intelligently.
Oh, the Chinese are very serious with that, okay? We can mix stuff, but we make distinction. This Mr. say that Mr. say that, and there's no mix, even if they can be put in the same book.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Great points. And just wonderful conversation. Thank you. Next up is going to be Jason, followed by Paul. Jason.
Oh yeah, I just want to ask, Kwang, you talk about the Zigong and the Confucius dialogue. Which part is there?
It's in the Ta Chuang, meaning the Si Zi, because it's 2 of the 10 wings. Okay, it can be called Ta Chuang or Ji Zi, meaning Ji Zi means appended commentary, or Ta Chuang means the great commentary. I prefer Ta Chuang because the 2 parts of the Ta Chuang is really the center of the 10 wings. So to call it Ji Zi, appended commentary, is a little bit laughable.
Hold on. On 戏词, at least I don't see that part. I didn't read all, but I read some of it. I don't remember have a dialogue. That's why I'm curious.
Yes,
because
that's why
a lot
yes.
of confusion said I know, but it's on 戏词 upper or lower?
Lower.
戏词下 you are talking about?
Yes.
There's a lot of confusion said, but there's no 子贡 said. That's
Yes.
what I read. Yeah.
The other place where you can find it, because it's at 2 places, is in the Shuokwa, the 8th one. Because
Shuokwa is talking about all the different hexagram. Okay, this is horse, this is cow, this is dragon, this is pig, this is chicken. That's what I know about Shuokwa. I just don't see the 子贡 said. That's why I'm a little bit curious on this part.
Yes, but in the complete Ta Chuang, you have that conversation, I guarantee you.
大传 or 团?
No, Ta Chuang, not
传.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, because the Tuan Chuang is the commentary on the decision on the judgment.
Is on each one, but not
exactly. The Tuan Chuan is 1 and 2, but I'm speaking of the Ta Chuan.
Oh, you talk about 大传.
5 and 6.
Yeah, okay. Let me
because let's not be sure that there's no confusion. 1 and 2 is about the commentary on the decision, Tuan Chuan. 2, 3, and 4 is about the commentary on the images. And 5 and 6 is about the great commentary, Ta Chuan, or also called Si Zi, even if I prefer the appellation of Ta Chuan.
Okay, let me double check because the version I have, I just don't see the dialogue. That's why a little bit. I know they have the different.
You have different versions, yes.
Yeah, they have a different version depending on which one you read, and that's the one I read. I don't see that. Okay. Anyway, I can.
I believe you, Jason, because I read some versions not having that conversation.
So you read some version, not okay. So I probably have to find the version have that part because
Yes.
I tend to read the shorter one. So
and after that, we wouldn't have a fight on which tradition is the good one.
Thank you, Jason. And Quan, if you could email it to Jason whenever convenient later on, so that
sure.
we can pursue that. Thank you. Next up is going to be Paul. If anybody else has any comments or question, you're welcome. Type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. Paul.
Yeah, thanks. Quan, I'd appreciate just some clarification because it's on the same subject, but I'm curious how much meaning existed for the purposes of divination originally. I still don't quite get that. Like, was the concept of sense perception, intellect, psyche, beauty, goodness, truth in the thinking in the earliest 4,000 characters? And if not, how did they decide what the hexagrams meant compared to how they might have decided it later? Does that make any sense as a question?
Well, it makes perfect sense because it's the central content of the conversation that I had with David. From rituals to philosophy, okay, or from religion to philosophy. Because let's not forget that at the beginning, well, first, okay, the stuff that is called scapulomancy or pyromancy, okay, when you burn a metallic rod and you use that hot metallic rod and you apply it against the bone of a dead ox or the plastron of a tortoise. Okay, the plastron meaning the ventral part of the carapace of a tortoise. It would produce a network of cracks. Okay, and that network of cracks in China in ancient times mean 4,000 years ago. Okay, at least, if not even going into prehistorical time. But I limit myself to 4,000 years ago. You have kind of magicians that will interpret the network of cracks as a prognostication, as a prediction, as a divination. That is the ritual.
Can I ask?
Sorry?
I mean, I understand that, but they were not thinking about the 64 hexagrams.
No, that's why I start with the primitive part, okay? From rituals to philosophy. So from 2000 BCE to 1000 BCE, when King Wen of the Zhou dynasty started to write the core called the Zhou Yi, having 4,400 characters, it was the beginning of philosophy, okay? It was not yet completely developed philosophy, but it was the beginning 3,000 years ago. What I mean is that in the past, human beings will regulate their emotions, their fear, their uncertainties by believing that there are spirits that they can ask questions. And those spirits, for the Chinese, the spirit are the spirit of their dead ancestors. And let's not forget that that kind of prognostication of divination ceremonies was the privilege of the royal house, okay? So it means that the ancestors, the dead ancestors of the king were considered as powerful spirits, okay? So the kings expect their dead ancestors to come to their rescue and to give them some answers to deal with problems in life. So that divination phase lasted for a very long time. And I would dare to say that even for people having believed that the spirits of their dead ancestor would help them even in 2024, would use the yarrow stick or would cast the coins with the belief, with the religious belief that the spirit of their dead ancestors or the powerful spirit would help them. So that divination, that religious dimension that I decided to start in 2000 BCE, but it was much older, but I decided to start it in 2000 BCE. It's still keeping on nowadays in 2024, and probably will still keeping on in the very far future, I'm quite sure. But from 1050 BCE to 500 BCE, there was a maturation of the Chinese thinking. Okay, so that's why around 500 BCE, if you believe tradition, or if you don't believe tradition, around 300 BCE, if you believe the archaeology and the philological scholars. So between the pretensions of tradition 500 BCE and what the scholars are telling us today around 300 BCE, the difference is not so big. So between 300 BCE or 500 BCE, you have the 10 wings, okay, which is the epistemological, ontological, and cosmological development based on that religious beliefs going back very long in prehistorical times, okay? And I make a rapprochement with the Indian civilization, with the Rig Veda and the Yajur Veda and Samaveda around 1300 BCE, which was the ritualistic phase. And about 500 years later, they produced the Upanishad around 900, 800 BCE, which was the philosophical, epistemological, and ontological, cosmological understanding coming from those rituals. And during that maturation phase between 1000 BC and 500 BCE for China, it was during that period that you have the hexagram, the symbolic meaning of king, and so on. And that control legacy of the Zhou royal house has been synthesized by Confucius around 500 BCE and has been received by the Han imperial house. And the Han imperial house ruled China between 206 BCE and 220 CE, so about 400 years. And so you have three phases. The primitive ritualistic phase around 2000 BCE, the philosophical development phase starting in 1000 BCE, having a synthesis in 500 BCE, and the imperial transmission phase around 200 BCE, when to be precise, 124 BCE, with the creation of the Imperial Academy, Taishui, putting in order on that control legacy and transmitting that control legacy and philosophical legacy to the future generation till us in 2024 and to the future too.
Srikant, can I just do one quick, thank you, sir. So I love everything you're saying. It's leaving me with this lingering question. I'm probably just stubborn about it, but when they did the divination, I don't need to worry about the tortoise, but with the yarrow sticks, before the philosophical development, they had to decide what the dead ancestors were saying. And to decide that, there's something, you don't call it an epistemology, some kind of framework to decide why when the sticks are this, this, and this, you do
Absolutely.
that. That's my question.
Your question is absolutely brilliant, because when they believe that the ancestor helped them, they believe that the ancestor would influence how the sticks will be distributed. Okay, and the people who still believe that the spirit will manipulate the stick still believe in 2024 and even in 20,024 that the spirit act on the distribution of the sticks.
But
And
what does the distribution mean?
because the way that you wouldn't get the sticks will determine the hexagram that you will have, okay? Because if you remember, everything that I have done in the beginning is to say, you have to do all that to get the first line, okay? If you want to do it the lazy way, you would take 3 coins and you would toss the 3 coins. If you have, for example, 3 heads, you would have 9 because each head is equal to 3, okay? So those who believe in the spirit would think that the spirit, because they want to help you, will control the appearance of the 3 heads on the 3 coins, because after that you toss the 3 coins 6 times, you will get the 6 lines. And if the spirit want to help you, they will control how the coins will appear head or tails in order that you get the right hexagram that will give you the indication of how to decide for the situation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, the thing is that these are, whenever you start studying something like this, the history of these ideas are really fascinating because they are encountered in very different form. I mean, this is a great example that Quan is talking about in I Ching, but the same is true with the Old Testament. The same is true with the New Testament. Like Old Testament is firstly written over a long period of time. Amos and Ecclesiastics. There is a big, like centuries of difference between them. Then on the top of that, as David was describing, there are traditions of how do you engage with the text, which become part of how that base of thought is processed later on. So actually around the time New Testament was going on, the Jewish scholars are doing something very, kind of analogous to the New Testament. The level at which they are, engaging with the text using the Talmud, the systems, but in terms of just the conversations, it's completely at a different level than what was there, say 500 years ago before that. Similarly, for the New Testament, people just think that it is there, but it was even what became part of the standard scriptures that happened over a period of time. And there was conversation and there is all of that. So that there is this interplay between the traditions and the text. And it's really, really fascinating to be going through that. So thank you. Next up is going to be Nick. Nick, go ahead. Nick, are you there?
Yes, can you hear? Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I missed last 5 minutes exchange between Juan and Paul. But nevertheless, if I could just share my thoughts on Paul's question. My understanding is that, hundreds of years before Confucius showed up, that was a long time ago. So when this book was written, they already developed a quite sophisticated notion of societal relationship, moral character, standards, everything. So, as sophisticated as today, without a form, epistemological or metaphysical foundation. So the puzzlement was, how did they do that? They hit on this binary system, which puzzled and intrigued the Leibniz, and even, nowadays the digital society built on that. And then the way they describe, the book described the evolution between yin and yang, intrigued the German, German idealists like Schelling in terms of the creation and etc. So the question was, how did they do that? How did they know? So it almost like the wonder we had with respect to the Egyptian pyramids or the Maya civilization, given the understanding of the available technology, available stock of knowledge, then how could they even achieve that? So a lot of people said, wow, this must be revelation, because there's no way human mind could have created this. And but the Chinese interpretation through the ages have rejected that. They somehow they refuse to develop a notion of creator revelation, but stick with this book, very hard to understand, but each adding their own commentary, or as David said, disputation throughout the ages. So to answer Paul's question, oh yeah, these guys more than 2,500 years ago knew very clearly the various notions of moral characteristics, societal relationship, and had a very good guidance on how to live a good life without indicating the metaphysical or philosophical foundation of those.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Nick. All right. So Quan, there are a couple of things we could do. Firstly, I want if you could give a preview of what you're thinking of doing in the second section. That would be one thing. And then I want to ask you if you would like to talk about the hexagram that you presented, or you would rather do it next time. That would be that's just a suggestion. You can either take it or leave it. But if you could first tell people about what you're planning to do in the second one.
In the second times, I would like to discuss a complete hexagram with the group. I choose hexagram number 11, Thai Supreme Peace. We will go together with the translation of Richard Woodlam, who has been translated from Chinese to German and published at INA in 1923 and translated in English in 1950 by Carrie Baines, who was a student of Carl Gustav Jung. I will send to you, Srikan, a electronic copy of the main section only about the hexagram and not about all the comments. It's a free copy that can be found on the internet, but I will send it to you after. So you can put on screen the number 11 when I would like to discuss it. Because and I probably would take 40 minutes for the discussion, because I would like to take the second hour of next time for questions, okay? Because I know that what I presented in the first 70 minutes today is very dense. And well, that's a bit pretentious for me to say that, but well, but this was not me, it was the spirit. So I would like to have more questions next time. I'm sure that there are more questions, okay? And I would like also to add a minute to the fact that let's not forget that around 500 BCE, there was a social organization that is very clear that the Zhou royal house would be replaced by something that would be an empire. And in 221 BCE, the empire has been created. The first dynasty lasted only 14 years, but the second dynasty, the Han dynasty, lasted 400 years. The first dynasty had the merit to create the empire first, and had the merit to create the modern name for China, because here the Indian play a role too, because the character that is pronounced Chin has been pronounced China by the Indian, C-I-N-A, and from China it became China, and something like China in various Western languages. And during that phase from 500 BC to 221 BCE, the phase, everyone that is part of the intellectual class and the ruling class in China knew that there was the march to empire. So that the fermentation, that intellectual fermentation, gave rise to those cosmological, epistemological, and ontological considerations. And the Han Empire had a lot of outstanding scholars who understood perfectly the value of those speculations and those deep thinkings. Because, once again, I come back, okay? Because as Plato wrote his 40 or so dialogues, not just for fun, okay? Because the superficial understanding of Plato nowadays, that most people thought that Plato was a ivory tower philosopher having written those stuff just for fun and for discussion between aristocrats having nothing else to do in their days. Okay, no. Plato wrote those 40 dialogues because there was a deep political crisis in Greece, having to fight the Persian Empire at the time. The Chinese intellectual between 700 BCE and 221 BCE were also in a situation where they know where the society was evolving rapidly, and there was a political chaos. It doesn't mean that it was war every day, but there was a political instability. So it gave rise to a lot of consideration. And let's not forget that at the center of the classical epistemological development is the notion of everlasting civilization, okay? Meaning that you need to have man having the mind powers that Confucius called the Junzi and Plato called the aristocratic man at a high level enough to maintain the empire and the everlasting civilization. I want to mention it because those stuff are not just for fun or for intellectual discussion. Those stuff are very political and are very related to everyday life and to the construction of nations, of empire, and of civilization, especially the everlasting one, the everlasting civilization.
Wonderful. Thank you. Consul, if it's okay, I want to give you kind of, what I got from your initial presentation, the points stood with, because as you're rightly saying, you covered a lot. So this will be a way to kind of, this is just my simple take on what you said, and then we'll go to Mark, and then we can close. Is that okay?
Perfect.
So, I mean, the thing that really stunned me was the importance of the infinite awareness, because that seems to be the thing, there's this vertical kind of movement that really brings everything together. Second is those 6 layers of the mind, I think is a fundamental idea throughout, again, divided as higher trigram and lower trigram, higher being the transcendentals, and lower being the earthly things. I also particularly appreciated your doing the parallels between the Western terminology and the Chinese terminology, going back and forth, because that made it very, far more accessible. I also like the fact that you were able to go into kind of the traditional way in which things are done with those sticks, showing exactly, which hand do you hold and what is the sequence of those. So at that level, which is kind of the ritual part of it, and then also talking about the deeper meaning of it, of the 6 layers. I really thought that, talking about the king was a way of bringing things together, of the kind of things that you're trying to, I mean, the ultimate goal towards which this is pointing to. And then you talked about the different layers, from the commoner to the kind of, petty officers, that entire structure. So the social structure mirroring the 6 layers of the mind. Also, I really liked that the purpose is that it's all about serving right. So basically, the lower trigram saying to the higher, saying that, look, I want higher trigram in operative here on earth, as opposed to saying that whatever I have is right. So that shows kind of the moral direction in which this is going. I love the idea of the gentleman as a necessity, not gentlemen, but gentlemen, basically people who can operate at the higher levels of the 6 layers, as being crucial to building the everlasting civilization. I also particularly like the idea, the analogous relationship between seasons, elements, ages of man, civilization, phases of civilization, and phases of the mind. So this is really a very it's a very very powerful set of ideas, and also just the beginning of saying there is heaven and there is earth, and everything is between, and man is really is between between heaven and earth, and that is our nature. And then how do we actually achieve that? Because that's what being humane, that is what humanity is about, by taking the mandate of the heaven and making it manifest on earth. So just, this is just amazing kind of a overview of the three transcendentals, again, truth, goodness, beauty, and then going from the bottom to the top, again, kind of the sense perception, intellect, and the psyche, or social sophistication. This is just covering a lot in a way which is on one hand true to what the historical development is, but also interpreting it in concepts from the Chinese tradition, which are kind of later versions, later capturing of these traditions, and then relating it to the Western context. So I thought that that was just an amazing presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Srikant.
Next up is going to be Mark, and then we will close up. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Srikant, and thank you so much, Kwan, for going into that in so much detail and making it live for us. One of the things that strikes me about the I Ching and the hexagrams is their physical nature. They're physical, they're visual, they're images. And this is one of the things I think is really unique about it. I don't know of anything in Indian, in the Vedas, I don't know of anything like that. I don't know. I know that there were certain forms of telling the future in Greece. They used various mechanisms, but reading the entrails of animals and things like that. But I'm wondering what we can learn from this visually very dynamic set of broken and unbroken lines, and what that tells us maybe about the ancient Chinese psyche.
Wow, I love your question, and I think I would not be capable to answer it in a comprehensive manner, but I will try something. I would say that if I try to go back to be the parrot of the sages, I would say that the automatic answer that I will have to meditate deeper, open, is about the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh principles that I read to the group and to Srikant maybe an hour ago, okay? About the psyche of the ancient Chinese. Because as I said, that I'm not happy at all with the English translation of I Ching, which is the book of change, or the classic of change. If I have authority, I would change it to the classic of being and becoming. Because that is precisely according to my understanding of the psyche of the ancient Chinese. And the fifth principle, I will read it again, okay? The archetypal figures can be traced analogically in all entities, and their flux gives rise to events including birth, growth, and death. And here I just realized that I should say that the answer to the questions is the reading and the meditating up and on for many years of principle 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I read principle 4. The polarity yin and yang, produces archetypal figures, seeing in heaven as changing constellation patterns. Here, constellation has to be understood as the physical constellation, but also as the constellation in timelessness. Because the 64 hexagram are put into A houses, and those A houses correspond to the A trigrams. And the A trigrams, oh, and here, I don't think that I will have time to go into detail, but here you see that you have the A trigram in small at the center and the A trigram in big at the periphery, okay? That is the Chinese way to represent the Nataraja, okay? The king of the dance, okay? The king being and the flames being becoming. So the 6 trigrams at the center is the sequence called the sequence of Fuxi, Fuxi, which is the sequence of timelessness, okay? Which is not exactly the same sequence than the peripheral sequence is the sequence of King 1. And the sequence of King 1 is the sequence of time because it begins with wood. Well, you have the 8 are categorized under the 5 phases, okay? Wood, fire, earth, gold, and water. Because once again, we come back to the seasons of nature, the seasons of man, the season of the mind of man, and the season of the everlasting civilizations, okay? So the sequence of Fuxi at the center is timelessness, and the sequence of King 1 at the periphery is the sequence of time. So that image that I just showed you is one possible answer to your question, okay? That is the psyche of the ancient Chinese, the dance of timelessness and time as ordered by 8 archetypes and expressed by 8 times A, meaning 64, not primordial, but 64 important configurations, let's say, okay? Because primordial would be the 8 trigrams, and the 64 would be the 64 important situation. So I read again principle 4 because I took 5 minutes to explain what I mean by configuration and constellation patterns. So constellation patterns, the true one of the stars in heaven, but also constellation in terms of the two circle that I just showed you, okay? So once again, the polarity produces archetypal figures, seeing in heaven. Here we have to understand heaven as timelessness, as changing constellation patterns, and on earth as time, as geometric patterns, as geographical pattern, and as biological patterns, okay? So geometric is the mathematical configuration of time realities. Geographical patterns is the geological configuration of time reality, and biological patterns is the life dimension in time reality. And the 5th principle, the archetypal figures can be traced analogically in all entities, meaning that in geology, in biology, in chemistry, in physics, in politics, in relations, the trigrams have something to say to you. The sequence of timelessness has something to say to you, and the sequence of time has something to say with you, and the 64 main situations have something to say to you, okay? And their flux, meaning the change in the places of the lines in different the 64 hexagrams, and their flux gives rise to events, including birth, growth, and death. And here, once again, birth, growth, and death is not only for a man, it can be for a nation, an empire, a civilization, a political party, the universe, etc. Okay? And 6 principles. Ancient sages were inspired to create the hexagrams as analogs of the archetypal figures, in which the 2 polarities are expressed by whole lines and broken lines, while flux is expressed by the changing places of the lines within the hexagram. And 7, the sages added oracular statement of prognoses indicating the changes to be expected in the lines and in analogous terms of events. So my answer to your question is the explanation of principle 4, 5, 6, and 7. But I am perfectly aware, even if I'm an overbearing person, that my answer is far to be comprehensive, that I need to meditate open them for a long time.
Thank you, Quan. All right, so there is one thing I forgot to tell you about what I really liked, and that's this division between, you know, the sixth line being 1, just the numbers, because I think that's very profound. You know, it's capturing something very deep. The 1 and then 3, you know, and then 2 polarities in the top trigram, and then 4 images, 8 trigrams, and 64 hexagrams. I mean, it's just really profound. So I really look forward to the next time, and would, you know, I look forward to receiving the copy of you know, what you're sending me. I'll try to go through it, because I think this has legs. You know, I would like to do more of this, because we've spent a lot of time. I love the Tao. And this is like connecting to a different, you know, both kind of reading of the Tao, Confucius, and I Ching. It's like connecting to another time. You know, and these are the foundational times of civilization. You know, the Chinese civilization. So I think I'm just delighted that we are, you know, exploring I Ching. Very, very grateful. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.